Well, welcome, Mandy, to the Flower Podcast. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't even know how long I've known you. I mean, been many years, actually.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of fun to finally be able to have you as a guest. So tell us about your business and maybe kind of a short version. And then I want to get into kind of how you got into the world of flowers.
Yeah. Well, I'm located in Birmingham, Alabama, which is right in the heart of the state. And I grew up in the flower business, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But through years and years, taken over and sort of rebranded it and made it my own. My mom and grandmother got out of it, and I really led into the wedding and event market. And at 26 years old, that's sort of quite a thing to get broken into with wedding planners and things. But I worked hard, and over the last, gosh, how long has it been? 15 years or so, sort of built that business up. And so now it's Hothouse Design Studio. And we do sort of mid-luxury to luxury events for Floral. And also out of that, started another business called PropHouse Birmingham. And that is a specialty boutique rental company where we focus on custom build items, bar facades, stage facades, lounge and things like that. So yeah, so I run quite a nice ship over here in the state.
I know it's a huge building you have. I mean, it's really impressive.
Well, thank you. It's you need when you have a lot of things, you need a big place to keep all those things, Scott. So,
I guess so.
Yeah, my mom is quite the collector, and my dad said, well, I mean, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Maybe just realized how to make some money at it. So,
I love that.
Yeah, yes.
So how did you get, I mean, I guess you kind of hinted at that. So you kind of grew up in the flower business, it sounds like.
I did. My grandmother owned a flower shop, and it's sort of just one of those little mom and pop corner stores. And after school, when I was in, second grade, third grade, I would go down there after school and do little odd and end jobs for her. And till my mom, came to pick me and my brother up, and we would jump in the garbage bins and the big dumpsters. We do everything, right? What kid will do anything for a quarter or a nickel? Yeah,
right. That's right.
But we grew up in that, and my mom took it over after that, and that was kind of my high school years. So of course, I called out on Valentine's Day so I could help deliver and everything child labor contained when you're in the flower world. And really, I went to college for interior design. It was real important for myself and for my parents to be able to get me a good college education, have a foundation, and because nobody said I had to go into the flower business, just because I was born into it. But I really saw an interesting time to get into having my own business. And my dad owned his own business. My mom did. So having that entrepreneurial spirit really was, something that was kind of in my blood too. I think I've always been a little bit of an overachiever, really dive into everything, and really had a roundtable discussion with my mom and dad when I took the flower shop over, and wanted to change from being a traditional mom and pop flower shop that did funeral sprays every day, anniversaries, into more of a wedding and event decor business. And so my dad was like, hey, you want to do it here? Here's some little bit of startup. And, I inherited a cooler, and I inherited, things that probably 150 rolls of ribbon. Floor satin back then. And so, got into that and really dug my heels in and started trying to meet wedding planners and kind of the movers and the shakers that were in my city, and trying to, get people to trust me with some of their wedding floral dollars. And, a lot of that I've had to learn as I've gone. And, and there wasn't really a roadmap for that wedding and event industry for me. I had great support from my parents. But they didn't know that avenue of the market. So kind of fell into that and tried to work really hard. And 15 years later, here we are.
Wow. So when you decided to do that, was that actually taking their business and doing that, or did you merge them at some point? How did that work? I guess I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, so my mom was ready to get out of the business. I have a brother who had a baby. So my mom was kind of ready to go in grandmother mode. And so she kind of wanted to wash her hands clean of it. And so, you know, my dad said, well, let Mandy take it over and do what she wants to do with it. If she's not happy in a couple of years, you know, no big deal, but you're out of it. So let her have a chance. And so, you know, I say I inherited everything that came with it. I got the phone number. So, you know, when I did the cardinal sin, Scott, I changed the name of the company. I
Okay, so
changed the name of the business.
what was the name before?
The name was Bell Florist.
Okay.
And it was across the street from a funeral home, which is called Bell Funeral Home.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
really was that neighborhood type shop. And then I moved it to the downtown Birmingham, which, you know, was probably about 20, 25 minutes from where they were. Changed the name of it to Hothouse Design Studio. I thought that sounded a little more appealing. And trying to get some of the movers and shakers in the industry to come, they would come to the heart of the city, but they didn't really want to go out to a rural suburb, you know? And so,
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got to transfer the phone number. So the first day I opened my doors, the phone was ringing for daily things. So I was able to pay the bills and things like that when I first started. But as far as, you know, getting those wedding clients and things like that, I was kind of on my own. But I opened with a little bit of a home decor accent store too. So the front of the shop had candles and gifts and things you would imagine in that area. But yeah, it took a few years.
So was that scary for you to make that kind of a jump, knowing where your roots were? I mean, moving, changing names. I mean, that's a huge shift.
Yeah, it was. I think the thing that weighed on my shoulders the most was that it was something that my grandmother had built so much, and that was her life. My mom had taken it over, and now kind of was in my hands to do what I wanted to do with it. So it was either, you know, sink or swim, sort of. And I just knew that I've always been a creative person, but flowers weren't always just the medium I knew I was meant to work with. You know, and I think that's why, you know, the division of PropHouse with all the rentals and things has been successful, because that's another part of being able to use some creativity. So the flowers, I had a knack for it. You have to have that natural talent, I think. And I think I was born with that from that perspective. But definitely learning techniques and flower names and all that kind of stuff, you know, took some time and growing up in it.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's so when they see some of these insane weddings you produce, I mean, just over the top, really luxury type weddings, what do they think now, knowing what they used to do, and then they see what you do with this now?
They're glad I'm doing it. It's not them. No, they're super proud. They really are. My grandmother passed away several years ago, but my mom, I like to say that my mom is kind of the storyteller. My mom has seen it from the beginnings all the way to what it is now. And so the industry itself has changed so much. And, you know, she really is. She's so proud. She loves to know what I did on the weekend. Well, how did that go? I mean, she's very still interested in it. But physically, you know what I mean? Not no deliveries or anything anymore for her. But she definitely is a pep talker and, you know, helps me keep my spirits high and things like that. So, but no, they love it. They love to see where it's evolved.
That's great. Well, yeah. Okay. So you made this huge jump, but I think professionally, I know some of the things I've been reading, you've really kind of taken the bull by the horns. I mean, now you're a AIFD member. You've been, I didn't know, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I didn't know you were the first Mayesh Design Star.
Because it was way back when, Scott. That's why.
Now you're being gracious, and I appreciate that. But it's like, maybe I was just so in the weeds myself, I wasn't thinking about those things. But also, I know back then, you know, social media wasn't as big as it is now.
That's right.
So, you know, we didn't hear about things as quickly as we do now. So what was that like to be the first design star?
Talk about scary. That was a very scary thing. I really hadn't delved into video that much.
Okay.
And so when Mayesh introduced this thing about being, you know, our first design star, I thought, I'll try it. I had some friends who owned a videography business that I had worked with a couple of weddings with. And I thought, okay, what concept can I do? What can I do for my video? And looking back on it now, I think because you had to vote. It was like a mass vote. Everybody had to vote for you. And there were some pretty hot and heavy contenders who had been in this business for years. And I was the little unknown kid on the block, you know.
The underdog.
But I really wanted to make my video personal.
Oh,
And
okay.
I did a little intro to it, and it was like, you know, I'm a Cocker Spaniel lover. I'm a bride's best friend. I'm a Southern, you know, hometown girl. Like, it was about me. And I think the audience really was able to connect with that. And they're like, oh yeah, this is a cool concept she did. So I think that sort of helped push that along. And, you know, Mayesh didn't know what they were doing either. Like, they didn't know, I didn't know. It kind of flew by the seat of our pants and made, you know, a year's worth of videos. That's, you know, the same person did one a month. And, you know, our team, we filmed out in LA at the headquarters for Mayesh for 3 months. And then they sent us the flowers, and we filmed in my studio for a few months. And so it was a very cool experience. And to win, like, if you were the winner, you were able to go to Holland. That was your reward. You got a trip to Holland to go to the flower farms and auctions and travel with the Mayesh team. And now that was a very much a once in a lifetime experience, which I remember. We like were on these little boats, not a canoe, but it was not much bigger than that, like going through the lilac fields and seeing the little islands. And it was so cool. We went to the Dutch auction house and got to sit in the actual auction room. And it was cool. It was a neat experience for this Alabama girl.
Well, that's incredible. I know it's just that alone is so overwhelming, you know, to the volume of flowers and the processes that go into that.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine. I really can't. And so, wow. And then how, you know, I don't get the opportunity to ask this question, and I don't think I ever have. I mean, I haven't had the opportunity often, but you know, AIFD, what has that meant for you to be a part of that organization?
You know, so many people have asked me, well, you know, do you make more money if you have that certification? And to be honest, my first response would be no, but I think it actually builds trust with some of your wedding clients, especially the dads or the moms who are paying for things. Because it's kind of like seeing that you've jumped through the hoops, you've passed the courses, you've done the testing. So you kind of have, I like to say, it's kind of like a simple doctorate in floral design, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me personally, it's been the connections that I've made. You know, now I feel real confident if I have a wedding in a different state or even a different country for that matter. There are people that I can call on and resources. And when you cold call someone and say, hey, this is so-and-so, they're like, I don't know who this is. But if you say, hey, this is Mandy and I'm, you know, a member of AIFD and I have a couple of questions, it kind of gets your foot in the door a little bit with some people. And I really think, you know, watching and seeing and receiving the respect from some of the major companies in the industry, they look for things like that to be able to, you know, to have someone who in their mind is sort of a reputable designer. You already know this person knows the rules. That means they can break the rules, you know what I mean? And things like that. So it really has, I think it would be the connections for me and having some of those corporate support when I needed it.
Sure, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a huge accomplishment, and I know that you know, this year, especially with Symposium being, you know, canceled and postponed, and I know there was some other things they were trying to put together, and I mean, it's just been a frustrating year for everybody, and I really think I want to dig into that maybe in a few minutes with everything that everyone's trying to do in this new year. But I wanted to see if we could, I mean, having two businesses, I was fortunate to a few years ago have been in Birmingham one day, and I didn't call and ask. I just dropped in your studio, and well, it's really more than a studio. It's like this production facility. And I dropped in, and you were somewhere else that day, I think on an appointment or something, and got to get the tour of the place and everything. And it just, you know, having both those businesses under one roof, you know, the kinds of collections you have with your PropHouse brand was just over the top. I mean, I was just so impressed. I've seen a lot of event company warehouse space with props and things like that over 20 something years. And I don't think I've ever seen one as organized and yet aesthetically appealing. I mean, it's like you could almost walk the shelves and shop the shelves as you know, are planning an event, or you're someone showing up. I mean, you could see everything. And I was pretty amazed by that. So what, obviously you started with flowers. What sort of spawned this love affair with creating this extra business?
You know, I've kind of been in my market. I'm kind of known as more a creative designer.
Okay.
I could be a little out of the box. So, you know, a lot of designers can be do Southern and traditional all day long, but not many can do modern or contemporary, or even want to take the challenge of doing something different. And I was always that go-to person for a lot of people. And, you know, not always could I find something in the marketplace or this backdrop that I had envisioned. Like, where am I going to get this from? Or how am I, you know, where can I find this?
Right.
And it was just really out of necessity that I would buy things. You know, there's some flower shops that are like, well, these are the 3 containers you have to choose from. Well, not me. I was like, oh yeah, Accent Decor, they have this great new container. So let me use this on this wedding so I can buy me some, right? And so my collection grew, right? Grew quickly. And I was open to, you know, my dad always said, you know, you got to spend a little money to make some money. And I was always willing to invest in new things to add to my collection so I could provide my brides and my event coordinators with a little more variety. And so it quickly grew. And that's how, you know, we went from a 3,000 square foot warehouse design studio to a 6,000 square foot design. And I thought, oh, this is plenty of room. And then we had a storage unit on top of that, and another storage unit. And, you know, I was lucky enough, I was able to save a little money and invested in buying a building. And so now we're housed in a 30,000 square foot building where, like you said, everything is kind of showroom ready. And that's kind of the way we like to keep it. That way we have the aisles where brides can actually come in, sit down for their consultation, and afterwards we walk them around the warehouse and they get to touch and feel and see things. You know, I've always worked in a brick and mortar studio.
Right.
And so, you know, I know a lot of designers, freelance designers and things like that may meet people and they say, oh yeah, I have that in storage, or, oh yeah, we have this, but people love to see it. And it helps me be able to upsell things when they can walk through and be walking past and, oh my gosh, I love that green velvet sofa. It would look beautiful at blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh my gosh, you know, and at that point they've seen it and they don't want to stop thinking about it. And they're, yeah, we'll just put it in the invoice and we'll see how the budget falls, you know? And so really, I mean, it works as a great selling tool for me to be able to have it and for people to see it. And I love it. You know, like I said, I'm a creative at heart. So I love putting those collections together. I mean, our most recent purchase was 75 mirror balls, disco balls.
Oh, I saw that on Instagram.
For a ceiling install.
Gosh.
And, you know, and it really is like people love things in quantity. You know, some of our lighting and draping companies, they have those, but they don't promote them. And the minute we promote, and, you know, it's like, it's the new trend. Like we see it in a lot of Pinterest posts and things like that. And some mass market are introducing a little bit of that. And it's like, well, hey, we jump on the bandwagon and we're the first people to do it in our area. So it really has, I don't want to say it's spun out of control, but we have a couple of PropHouse sales a year. And a lot of our clients and things love to come to those because they're, you know, our gently used items and things like that we want to move through. So it's it definitely is a neat accompaniment to the flower side of things.
Sure. Well, and I think I love what you said about, you know, people walking through, and even if maybe there's an item that wasn't part of your previous conversation, and then they see this item that, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to have this. And
yeah,
I mean, it's just brilliant. Now, how does that, I know that when I did visit, I want to say it looked like the night before you had an open house, and there was this huge circular floral chandelier hanging from the ceiling, and it was kind of crazy. And I thought, so do you have an open house for brides? Do you have them for potential customers to see the props like other wedding professionals? How do you promote? I mean, you have these, you're selling to competition too, right? I mean, you're kind of
Sure.
letting them come in and rent your
Yeah.
items and things. How does that all work? Because I mean, that's kind of that
Yeah.
can be a touchy thing, I would think.
It can be. And, when I first started Prop House, it was too because I had so much stuff. People were like, oh, can I borrow this or can I borrow that? And I didn't know where everything was going. I couldn't keep up with it. So I knew I needed a process for that. And that was sort of another part of it. And I thought, it's not the container, it's what you do with it. And there's so many different
Exactly.
ways to use it. And so, every designer is different. And so, my competition down the street, I make my own decisions and I make my own creations, and what they do is something different. And so I figured, hey, why should they buy a dozen of these vases when they can come and rent mine? Because they're just sitting there collecting dust. They might as well pay for their space, right?
Right.
And so I'm not afraid of that. I don't think you should be afraid of competition. Everybody, you just have to kind of put your head down and I've always said, it's not that I strive to be successful. I strive to be of value to people.
Mm.
And, and I've really, I think, made myself valuable in my market because I am a great resource for things, whether it be something tangible or whether it be something mental, helping them come up with a concept, or how do they accomplish that? How do they go from just a thought to the actual reality of something being executed?
Mm.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that doesn't scare me. I welcome it. We try to be friends around here.
Well, and that's the thing is, some areas of the country are more collaborative than others, and I
Hmm.
feel like I like to think in this day and age that people can be more collaborative because
Yeah.
just like you said, people have different styles. Some people have different approaches.
Hmm.
Some people don't are scared or not scared, but it's too much to handle these big luxury weddings. They'd
Yeah.
rather have a smaller
Absolutely.
wedding they can manage and they can just crank
Hmm.
those out weekend after weekend. Other people want to go for that big big show. Um, where and I know you said when you were kind of sharing about your business that you're a mid luxury to luxury kind of
Hmm.
range.
Hmm.
Again, going from the flower shop to that level of event, was that intentional from the very beginning, or is that something that involved maybe raising your minimums and just trying to go for those bigger
Yeah.
projects?
Yeah. I think when you first start out, when anyone first starts out, they like to think
Mhm.
they have a plan, but really they're just flying by the seat of their pants, right? We're all just
Okay.
in it, right? And
Yeah.
I posted up this thing today that said, say yes and then figure it out later. And Tina Fey said that. And I really think that's a great antidote for like where we are and what we're doing. Because when I started, I had a good foundation, but I would definitely was learning as I went. And, I mean, just to go along and develop those processes and develop the right way to do things. And it takes a lot of time. And like you said, there's some florists, they just want to do that $3,500, $5,000 floral where they just drop it on the table and put a couple of altar pieces up and they're done. They have another person that helps them in a van. Like what will fit in there is what they want to do. When you get into things like what I'm used to doing now, we have box trucks and we have teams of people that get on scaffolding and aren't scared of heights and things like that. So, when I first started, it wasn't my intention necessarily to have a limited number. I was like, hey, yeah, they want to hire me. Yeah, we'll do it. But I think as you get busier and your brand gets bigger and you become more of a go-to person, you can't do, or you can, but if you want to facilitate 6 weddings in a weekend, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And I hired some designers that were also able to sell weddings. So I wasn't the only person selling weddings. We had 3 other people who were selling weddings. And so it really got to be, I don't want to say it was out of control, but it was more, I was getting to the point of being the owner where I was a little uncomfortable not having my hand on something like that.
Sure.
And so, I decided that it was best to kind of reel it back in a little bit. Plus, a lot of people wanted to talk to me. You know what I mean? I was the owner, and I didn't want him to feel like, oh, I'm having to talk to somebody else when I really wanted to meet with her. So a lot of factors I learned along the way, kind of going into that, and, you know, working smarter and not harder, and really, you know, focusing on what team I had built of talented individuals and what they were good at. And frankly, like I can go down in the design room and do any flower thing I need to, but I'm more the salesperson at this point. You know, I do the selling, and I do the floral recipes. And so I kind of dream it up and kind of get the skeleton made. And then I trust them to actually put it together. And then on site, I'm kind of like the finisher. You know what I mean? It's kind of like
Sure.
putting the detail on. And so I was telling a freelance designer the other day, I said, think about it this way. Like, I want you to bake the cake. I want you to ice it. And then I'm going to be the one that comes back and does the piping, adds little flowers to it. Like, that's the finishing details, I think, are where the beauty lies when you do some big things. You've got to have help along the way to get the foundation put in place.
And I feel like in a lot of ways, that's what your clients are paying for too, that Mandy touch, you know, when, you know, that final touch to kind of make sure everything's just right. I mean, what you just got done saying was, there were so many things in there I kind of want to talk about. One, I think about when you get to that level where you're producing that many weddings in a weekend, even though they may be smaller, I think it's so hard to stay profitable because, you know, the labor, the van rentals, all these added expenses,
absolutely,
it's just hard to recoup that from those smaller ticket weddings, I believe. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's like my very first guest, which I'm sure you know, Sybil Silvestri. You know, she was telling me one time when she was moving, it was like, why did she have 100 and something screwdrivers? And it was because,
you know what? I was driving in the car to Atlanta when I listened to that podcast, and I was like, oh my God. And I know Sybil. And I was like, oh my gosh, Sybil, exactly. Like, how many hammers do we have? How many hammers do we need? Yes, I remember exactly where I was. Yes.
And the thing is I think when you have all these weddings going on, it's like, it's just so crazy that sometimes it's too easy just to go do that, to go buy that other hammer, to go get, you know, and anyway, but so it's interesting to hear about that transition. I feel like there's two things that I really would like to try to unpack, and I don't know how the best way to unpack this is, but I feel like you really touched on staffing from a way, like, you know, how do you go about doing that? And also the processes of, you know, making sure that all your ducks are in a row and that you're organized. And because it doesn't matter whether you're doing several smaller weddings or fewer gigantic weddings, you know, those two things can eat you alive if they're not right. And juggling two businesses on top of that under one roof, I can't think of anyone better to talk about these things. So maybe let's start, I don't know which would be better to start with first, but I think maybe staffing. Let's talk about that. You know, how did you approach that, you know, as your business grew? You know, what criteria did you use to hire full-time versus freelance? I'm just throwing the big topic at you, and then I'm going to fasten my seatbelt and enjoy the ride.
Right. I hear you. Well, you know, I started out doing everything, really. I would pay the bills. I would do the sales meetings. I would go to the wholesaler and pick up the flower order. You know what I mean? And I started out with one other staff person, and who was a designer. And so, you know, in the afternoon, we would go out and deliver. Like, you did what you had to do.
Right.
And as, you know, the company grew, you saw the need, well, now I need a delivery person. So let me find a person that can deliver. And I didn't maybe need them all day, just in the afternoon. So I really looked for something that fit my budget, per se, of what I could afford to spend. And then as we started doing weddings, even though they were smaller, it took more designers. And I found myself really thinking, what do I personally like to do? What am I good at? What am I not good at?
That's hard.
You know, and they always like to say those people with the creative brains aren't always the best business people. And I wouldn't say that I'm not a good business person, but the accounting will drown you if you are not used to Excel spreadsheets and QuickBooks and all those good things. And so, my goal was to really make enough money to where I could pay someone else to do that part of it.
Okay.
And I think just learning along the way and realizing what the next step is and sort of setting that goal that makes your life easier. I dreamed of the day when I would be able to have a general manager. Like, when is that day going to come when I can have one? And, it really took a long time to get to that point, because I was the general manager. I did manage everything. And, I was drowning in wedding proposals, staying up late at night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to get these proposals to these girls I had promised. And I was like, this is ridiculous, Mandy. Like, you got to do something about this. And I remember talking to Ian Prosser, and I know you've had him on the show before with his daughter Zoe. And, he was like, oh, well, Zoe, in his great Scottish accent, I'm not going to even try to impersonate that. But he said, Zoe sits in on all the meetings with me and she takes all the notes. And I was like, well, she preps everything. I just come back and price it. And I was like, well, then I need a Zoe. Like, who's my Zoe going to be? And so I hired an assistant, and all she did literally was be my right-hand person. And she was like my shadow. And, she sits in the meetings with me and takes all the notes. So I'm never losing the eye contact with the client, and I'm able to carry the conversation. And so, at the end of the meeting, she's the one who we use details for our proposals, and she puts all the info in details, and she puts their inspo pictures in, and she practically does pretty much everything except the unusual installs or something like that I need to put a finishing touch on. And then I go back through line by line, price it, and then it goes out to the client. And so, that to me was very life-changing, having someone who could not only, facilitate better time management for what I had to do, but also heard what the client wants. Because it gave me a little bit of peace of mind that if for some reason I wasn't going to be able to be on site one day, those clients knew who she was.
Oh yeah.
They were familiar with her. And so it gave me a good peace of mind. And, she's been my assistant for, gosh, I don't know, about 5 years now. And now it's like, well, what can I do without her? What am I, and, but she's grown and now we flipped her over to help sell for PropHouse. And she's a great salesperson because she's listened to everything I've said for the last 5 years and how I sell things and my rapport with the clients. And so it's really been a great thing. And so I think for people who are looking for that next step, it really is what you need yourself. What's going to make your quality of life better? And for me, it was definitely having an assistant. It was definitely being able to hire an accountant who could handle my bookkeeping. And, eventually when we developed 2 different companies, was the time I was able to get a general manager because it was a lot to handle the facilitation of 15 staff members and payroll and all that. So you just have to, you have to take baby steps. But I think personally, I got to the point to where I felt like I said, I guess out of control is a good way to describe it, where your profit was being gone. It was eaten up because people were making their own flower orders. Well, maybe, this wholesaler wasn't the best place to get that. Maybe it's a little bit less expensive from this wholesaler or grower. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of reeled it back in and now, we set a higher minimum. And so now every person that comes in meets with me and my assistant and, and they're able to get that one-on-one client experience I think most people want.
Well, I love that because, I can totally picture you being able to completely be engaged with that client. Mm-hmm. And, when you have to stop and take notes or you have to stop and write things down, you lose, it's sort of like you lose that rhythm or you lose that momentum that you build, and you don't have to do that. And in the end, if you've got somebody that's detail oriented and is just being that sponge to absorb the entire meeting, then, what pressure that takes off you, especially if they can turn around and plug it into details and generate, that outline. And
and Scott, she is so much more organized than I ever could be. so it really is looking for where you falter or someone who can come in and help. But she kind of keeps my life on track when it comes to that kind of stuff. So you know, it definitely behooves you to be able, because like I said, now, like my paycheck, I'll spend a little of my paycheck to keep her, because you know, it really does. It makes your quality of life so much better.
Absolutely. Well, making that transition from making, you know, hiring a freelancer versus a full-time employee, when do you make that call, or when did you make that call? Because I mean, you can obviously only really speak to your experience, but
Sure.
as a rule of thumb, you know, when you're growing, at some point you're like, okay, this is crazy. I need somebody here more,
Yeah.
or what?
Right.
I'm curious how you break
Yeah.
that down.
So, you know, as we grew and grew, obviously we had, you know, 3 or 4 weddings that were happening every weekend. So we were facilitating, we couldn't get cleaned up from the last weekend's wedding before we were diving into the next week's, right?
Right.
Processing and all of that. So, you know, I saw myself where I did need full-time people rather than part-time people. But then you also have to look at what task are they doing? Because a really talented, educated, experienced designer will get paid more than a person who is simply processing flowers. You know, you really have to think about what is this person bringing to my team, and what value is that to me. And you know, I added several designers, and then you know, I have right now 2 full-time and 1 part-time designer who is on staff right now. And so, you know, they're here to facilitate the design room. We offer daily service. I don't promote it.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? We do have, I don't know, maybe 10 daily orders a week, not many. And it's mainly for our corporate clients that we just like to facilitate when we do their events. We'll be happy to send their wife something. And so, you know, they stay busy during the week. And I think that's the thing. If you have the amount that can keep them on staff, then that's what you need to do. If you only do 1 wedding a month, well, it's not worth having full-time designers. You can bring freelancers in for that. And, you know, for our big weekends, you know, I bring freelancers in on top of our normal staff. So you just have to kind of pick and choose.
No, that makes sense. I mean, especially as you're growing and the workload grows, and I mean, and nobody wants to be on staff anyway and be bored. I mean, everybody likes to stay busy when they're, you know, at a job, and that makes perfect sense.
And having 2 businesses, I mean, you know, if my Floral Design Studio isn't busy, then my PropHouse people, there's always something to paint or something to do. So I'm like, you know how to use this paintbrush? We'll give you a little tutorial. So I'm good at keeping people busy.
I bet you are. I think, you know, one of the things I was curious about is how have you handled the whole COVID situation this year? I mean, I know everyone is, you know, figuring out new things and stuff. And I'm just curious, you know, having 2 companies to keep busy that both sort of rely on the wedding business, that had to be, or it still is, kind of scary.
Yeah, it still is. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, actually this weekend we have a wedding that had rescheduled from the shutdown weekend. And so we're in the heart of rescheduling right now of those events happening. And scaled down versions of those events. You know, we're still not rocking and rolling the way we were before. And I think the thing is, you know, the flower part of my business has slowed down so much because we do big events. Big events aren't happening.
Right.
You know, and I had to kind of decide, hey, do I want to roll out micro wedding things? Do I want to roll out, you know, hey, we're lowering our minimum? And everybody's different, but I personally decided that I wanted to stick with that premium service and not dilute it, and kind of try to navigate the waters to get through this hard time. And luckily I have the other side of my business, PropHouse, which doesn't have a minimum. And so, you know, we're seeing lots of like will call things where people can come pick up an arbor or something for their smaller wedding. We're seeing a lot of people booking in a short amount of time. Hey, I need this next weekend, or you know what I mean? And we welcome those surprises. Now, does this in my warehouse staff into a tailspin? Absolutely. You know, but we're all doing what we have to do. And, you know, I had a big team meeting with everybody and I was like, hey, look, you know, we're down this amount in sales and we're not going to be able to recover from that. So we have to do everything we can. So don't think I'm just nickel and diming you if I'm asking you, why do we need that can of spray paint, or why do we need those, but you really have to step back and look at what you're really spending. Because it is, and nobody, I think my biggest thing is there's no end to it. If I knew I had to get through December, that would be one thing,
Right.
but we don't know how long it's going to last. You know what I mean? And so it really is. I mean, we're having people now kind of coming back around and having more wedding consultations and things like that, in the hopes that in April and May of next year, we'll be able to get back to some of those bigger numbers. But, a lot of our venues have cut it to 30 people or 50 people, and have a lot of strict guidelines. So we're doing what we can.
Do you, have you been able to tap into more, you mentioned the smaller weddings or the pop-up situations, but like photography, people doing photo shoots, things like that, for, save the dates, or I don't know. I'm just trying to think, you've got these great props, and I'm curious, is that a market that you can push or advertise into? Does that make sense?
So one thing we're developing with our prop side of the business is, and decor wise for the Floral, is we're hosting photographers to do their mini sessions for holidays in our warehouse.
Oh, wow.
So we're setting up sort of little vignettes, 4 different vignettes, and they can rent the vignette for the day and do as many little mini sessions with families as they want to. And giving them a different sofa option or chairs from other photographers and changing them up a little bit. So we're really having to sort of expand our horizons to see what we have to offer for a need that we have never been able to, because we've always been so busy with weddings and events. And so we're having to sort of look and see, well, okay, we can do this, or this is a neat opportunity nobody's ever had. And so we're kind of opening up to suggest, and we had a photographer ask us 2 or 3 years ago if we could do that, and I was like, we're so busy, there's no way we could let anybody in our warehouse right now. December is our busiest month of the year. It looks like a disaster down here, there's no way, but now it's clean as a whistle down there. And so and that also is like giving us something to do, a creative outlet, to come out with these Christmas vignettes and things that we haven't been able to do before, and use all the Christmas product we have, instead of it staying in a box for another year, putting it to use.
That's so cool. And I didn't even think about Christmas. I'm thinking about events at Christmas, but do you do holiday decor? Or is it just more the event side of what the holidays?
It's more the event side of the holidays. I think we probably have a dozen Christmas trees, and we just like decorate them, take it, put it in a Tupperware container. A tub. Take it to the next event, put it up again, so we decorate lots of Christmas trees during the season, but we don't do a lot of home installation. I did when I started, and then as the events took off, I kind of refocused and did that. So, but who knows? This year, I don't know. I'll be decorating a lot of mailboxes probably, How many mailbox, garlands can we fit in the truck? A lot will fit in a box truck, Scott.
That's right. It's like you can do those hit and run type situations, and you pull off, and magical team pops out and knocks it out, and then right on to the next. That's awesome.
Well, see, and then I just have to create it like a competition for my staff. These 2 trucks, all right, how quickly can you get back? And they love a competition,
With no complaints. You can't have any complaints.
Yeah, right.
I love that. Well, gosh, there's just so many things I want to ask you. When it comes to the floral side of your business, I appreciate what you had to say about, trying to really weather the storm with your business model that you've got.
Right.
I think that's great, and I can see a lot of merit with that. When it comes time to execute, let me ask this question first. Do you still have events on the books this year, or has everything moved to 2021? How does this year kind of looking, for this wedding season?
Yeah. So like I said, right now we're in the heart of a lot of the reschedules happening that canceled in March and April and June. And so we're pretty solid through the end of October. November, December, kind of quiet. We kick back up probably around March of next year with a few things. We do a lot of corporate business, and a lot of corporate companies haven't even gone back into their offices They've
Oh,
said
wow.
to January, we're working from home. So there's no holiday decorating in their offices, or there's no corporate parties happening. And that's what we did majority of for December. It was more corporate than wedding. And I've done my due diligence and reached out and been like, hey, how's it going? Checking in with you. How does the season look? And they're like, oh yeah, no, we're not doing anything. And
Oh,
so,
so
you
frustrating.
it is, it's super frustrating. And so I think just thinking about, like I said, what else can you do to use your talent and your creativity and the props you have and the staff you have, and keeping people employed. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a big thing for me. Being the owner is, it's not just these people's jobs, it's their, it's putting food on their table for their kids and things like that. So there's a lot to think about when you're the boss and you're the owner.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, I mean, it's really, I would say, quiet until
Mhm.
probably next March, and we kick back up a little bit.
Okay. I was hoping maybe you might have a few things that were still going to shake out. But no, you're right. I didn't even think about the corporate side of it. I mean, because I remember, gosh, what year was it now? Back 2008 or 2009, when a lot of the stock market had crashed and there was
Hmm.
all these, company bailouts, and it was like just taboo for businesses to spend the money to have a party. They
Right.
may have had
Right.
the money,
Yeah,
but they weren't going to spend it because it didn't look good to be laying all these people off. But then, oh, we're going to have this
absolutely.
Christmas party. And
Hmm.
so now it's not quite that situation, but it's still the net same gain. It's like
I think people
parties.
still feel that way though. I think companies feel that way at this point too. And luckily I was a baby then when that happened. My business was young, so I didn't really
Uh,
feel it as much. I might probably happen to me, but I didn't feel it because I didn't have that momentum yet.
right.
But this time it's definitely been one of the most challenging things I've had to go through as a business owner for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said that word challenge, because I think, besides this year, what do you think was one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome to this point?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question right there. Um, I think learning how to manage a staff.
Mm,
I think that was something that I wasn't really prepared for. I went to school for interior design. I minored in business, but really when you're the owner and you're the boss, you're the ultimate decision maker.
right.
And whether that's a good thing to have to be or a bad thing to have to be, everything kind of stops with you. The buck stops with you. And I think, managing, because even like right now, we'll just use COVID example.
Okay.
Some of my staff are super sensitive to everything, mask wearing, 6 feet apart, riding in trucks with other people. And then I have another side of my staff who, it's not that big of a deal. If I get it, I get it. I mean, it's okay. So even that variable between that and having to set rules in place and, well, this is what the CDC says, this is what the health department says, I have to lay down my own ground rules for my own business because we are an event. And if we
Mm-hmm.
have somebody who comes up positive, it sort of spirals a little out of control. Who do they eat lunch with? Who have they been on, pickups and deliveries with? Who have they? And so it can take out 5 of my staff members in the blink of an eye. So
Mm.
we've had to be really careful about that. And I think managing all the obstacles that come with having a larger staff has been probably the most challenging for me because you have to learn how to hire people and you have to learn how to fire people. You know what I mean? You can read a lot of books about it, but until you have to sit in that hot seat and do it yourself, it's
Yeah.
not easy, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think
So,
too, and I think when you are a small business and you get to know people more,
yeah,
and then you have to sit in that hot seat, it's kind of like, the personal side of the decision you've made, and
yeah,
and you've got to make it, but it doesn't,
hmm,
I don't know, it hurts. I feel like it hurts in a lot of ways.
yeah, it does. And,
So,
you kind of have to separate yourself a little bit. And I'm a compassionate person and, I have a lot of devoted people. And to think about that is hard. You know what I mean? It really
mm-hmm.
is. It's definitely hard to have to be the person who does all that. And you hire a general manager and you think, oh, well, they can do that. But it doesn't always work that way. Doesn't always work that way.
Yeah,
But
because sometimes it makes it worse because then it doesn't come from you; it comes from this
yeah,
other person, this newer person. That
yeah, yeah.
uh,
So
That's
I
awesome.
definitely try to keep it personal with my staff and make sure they know they're being listened to, because
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing. They just want to know they're being heard,
Right.
and that they're, they can share with you their thoughts, whether you take it with a grain of salt or you really take it to heart, but at least listening to their side of
Right.
the story.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like um, I wanted to ask you something and now it's left me. Oh, I remember. Um, I know when we were talking before the interview, you had mentioned a talk that you gave with some things that you wish you had known
Yeah.
before like it'd been great if someone had told you these things.
Right.
And I know that you had several of them, but I was just wondering if you would mind to share one or two of those that might. And of course, you just shared this incredible thing about staffing, but yeah, maybe there's one or two of those that would be kind of really good
Yeah.
for our listeners.
Yeah. I was, a lot of people, I'm sure, have heard of Intrigue with Sarah Campbell.
Hmm.
She invited me to be a speaker at her first Intrigue conference. And she was like, I don't know, Mandy, whatever you want to talk about. What lesson, what do you want to say? What do you want to design? And for me, it was just as important for people to learn more about the business or something that had made my life easier than it was for me to stand up there and make a pretty flower arrangement. And so I said, well, Sarah, I think I want to do 10 things I wish somebody had told me 10 years ago. And, even from the simplest of things, like one thing, we used to pack everything in a van,
Hmm.
like, and we would have to make 50 trips inside a facility. And then as my staff grew, I was like, there's got to be an easier way for this. And so we started using rolling carts, like the silver stainless racks, and we would do that. And then you wrap them with like big shrink wrap, right? And you just roll those things in the cooler, and you roll them on the truck, and you roll them in the venue. And it's life changing. And I think the bigger events you do,
Hmm.
you realize how important it is for staff. Time is money. Does it take you 4 hours to set this wedding up, or does it take you 2 hours to set this wedding up?
Sure.
And learning about the whole box truck rental business. We now lease two box trucks, but it got to be where every weekend we were renting 4, 5, 6, 7 box trucks. And there's nothing worse than being the owner and you pulling up into your parking lot and seeing like 10 Penske trucks. You've got quite a day ahead of you. We should be like the poster child, the commercial for Penske rental, right? I tag them a lot on Instagram. I'm like, oh
Uh,
yeah, Penske,
they like
you
you,
get
I'm
a lot of my
sure.
dollars.
Yeah.
But deciding like, when is it time to go from renting a truck to leasing a truck? Being smarter with your money and thinking about those sort of things. So it's everything from the simple thing of, hey, rolling a rack into a venue, where you can get 20 arrangements on it versus having two hands to carry a box that has, we all have the flower box. We got the little squares in and put the 4 arrangements in. I
Right.
mean, one person can carry one of those, but a rolling rack can carry 3 of those. So, it's just a facilitation of a lot of that kind of stuff. And getting a mentor, you know what I mean? Finding someone, that was one thing I told everybody. Find someone that you look up to. And this was, I mean, social media was happening. We were in the world of Facebook, and Instagram had just started, and and you could see people on there, but it was before podcasts were popular and things like that. So you didn't really have a great resource to get a lot of advice. And I think that's something AIFD did for me. It let me find several people who did what I wanted to do, and to be able to find someone that I could ask these questions to and not be embarrassed, or
Mm.
things like that.
Yes.
And so I think finding a mentor was a good thing. I wish somebody had kind of told me a long time ago, don't be afraid to ask someone some advice. They'll share what they want to share. you know
Mhm. No,
the
that's
rest you
really
can try
good.
to figure out. But I mean, just like Ian telling me Zoe was his right hand person in those meetings, it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, if Ian can do it, I can do it, right? And so, just things like that. But yeah, getting a mentor was another one.
Wow. Well, I can totally appreciate that because Those same racks I have in my garage. That's our shelving in our garage, and we're getting ready to move. And I thought, and when I was out buying boxes today, I saw the roll of shrink wrap, and I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to do that. And I was being so short-minded because I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to leave the racks there. But now I think what I'm going to do is load the racks up, wheel them on the truck, wheel them off the truck, unload them, take them back, and load them up again. And
look at that, Scott. You can learn something new every day, can't you?
hallelujah! I tell you what, I'm just excited to be able to apply this to my move right now, today, tomorrow,
your everyday life,
my everyday life, and so that's awesome. Well, I always like to end. Well, first of all, before we get to my ending question that I always ask, I love every time I see you enter the world of Accent Decor. I always love what you create, and I'm always excited to see what you've done. In fact, I know that we've shared some pictures for them as our sponsor that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know Mandy did those. That's
right.
No wonder I love them so much. You know, I think that that's really kind of cool how you've worked with them. How, you know, what is something you've learned from that experience? I mean, it must be kind of cool being able to see things before they're released and all that kind of stuff.
It's hard keeping a secret, Scott. It's hard keeping a secret.
Well, hopefully you get to place your order early. You get the first order.
Absolutely. I'm like, now I know it's going to be released on the website this day, but really, when are you going to have it?
Yeah, thank you.
You know, but yeah, you know, everybody over Accent Decor, I feel like I've sort of grown up with them. After I received the Mayesh Design Star, I'll never forget, I got a call from Margaret Hoffman.
Yeah.
And to get a call from Margaret was like, what? You know, and she asked me, she was like, I like what you're doing with, you know, Mayesh, and we would like for you to come and work with us some. And I was so scared. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to expect. But, you know, I went and I did a photo shoot with them, and it's very fast paced. And, you know, the minute you're finishing one container, Margaret was putting another one in front of you. And next thing I knew, there were 7 lined up on the table over here that I needed to do. And learning how to design for the camera, you know, it's very different to do that. And you have to learn your speed, because, you know, you don't want the photographer and these 5 other people to be standing around waiting on you to finish something. And so, you know, I just kind of jumped in head first, feet first, whichever. And I was able to sort of develop those skills as I went. And luckily they saw the potential in me and didn't be like, okay, this girl, no. But, you know, as they've grown, and Sarah, their daughter, now has become the creative director, and I love working with Sarah and her whole team she's built, you know, and you know, I probably go do photo shoots with them, I don't know, 5 or 6 times a year. And I get to see a lot of the new product, and I get to see what's coming down the line. And my little creative person that sits over here on my shoulder is like, yeah, I love that. And it benefits me too, you know, with like my props. Like, I get to see, hey, maybe I should invest in a little bit more of this, because they're going to, when it comes out, I want to be the one that has it, you know? And so there's things like that, but it really is a cool experience to see a large company like that. I mean, you think I have a big warehouse. Their warehouse is amazing.
Oh my gosh, it's insane. I know Frank was taking me on a tour one day, and we were in the back, and I see this wall, and I'm thinking, oh, okay. And then we go around this wall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like another football field. And then go around this wall, there's another football field. I'm like, oh my gosh, this place is huge. And but I mean, to create and process and move the amazing things they move, you've got to have space, and the demand for it is proves it. So
and their customer service is amazing. You know, I mean, I know they're a sponsor of you, but I mean, they're a sponsor of me too. They, you know, they jump on my side and stand up for me and help me whenever I need it too. And, you know, I can always call them and be like, hey, I've got this event, and then I've got 10 of these containers, and they just added 2 more. And like, they're willing to overnight something, or they're willing to, you know what I mean, jump through the hoops and have excellent customer service. If something comes in wrong, the next day they've got something else shipped back out to me. And that, I think that says a lot, especially for a company that large, you know what I mean, that they're taking care of all their customers like that, and a family run business. And And it really is, it's a great company to support. And I'm actually going over there next week to work with them. So
Oh, cool.
I'm
Well,
excited to see what's coming down the line.
if I wasn't moving, I'd try to go dive in and just
Yeah.
connect.
Right.
But well, I always like to end with that last question of advice, and it can either be something that's just on your heart you want to share, or maybe a piece of advice someone gave you that meant a lot.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, and my staff laughs at me sometimes, but in a consultation or something, I'll come up with something and I'll be like, oh yeah, we can do that. And the whole time I see Ashley and my assistant over there being like, what is she thinking? How in the world are we going to do this? But the client never knows that. You know what I mean? And
Right.
and I saw this quote by Tina Fey, the one I put up today, and it says, say yes, you'll figure it out later. And I really think that's part of it, starting out and then growing into being a company that does ceiling installations and, you know what I mean? All these elaborate backdrops and things like that. It's like, you figure it out. Does it need pipe and drape poles, or does it need trussing? Does it need, to hang 75 mirror balls in the ceiling? Well, who is going to help you accomplish that? And what steps do you have to take to get from the start to the finish? 7 hours later, there's 75 mirror balls in the ceiling, and so I think not being afraid to say yes, but knowing you can figure it out later. But you have to be careful though, because you have to have the support team behind you to be able to have that knowledge that can help. We have a carpenter on staff, we have a person who paints all the time, and without those people helping me figure out the logistics of how to put things together, you need to surround yourself with people who have stronger points in some areas than you do. So just not being afraid to say yes, you'll figure it out later, but making sure that you've got the team behind you and the people who kind of pick up where you lack, I think.
No, that's really great. And I think too, when you say yes, I feel like you're open to the possibility.
Yeah.
And a lot of times things present themselves that wouldn't if you just said no. And it takes a huge amount of courage, and I think one of the things I hear when I hear you on many of the answers that you've shared today, I hear vision. I feel like you're one of these visionary personalities that you can see way outside the box, and you color outside the lines, and I just feel like when you're open to that, anything's possible. And I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it put myself out there and doing that video for Mayesh and,
exactly.
Trying to do the U Bloom contest. And I mean, I won that. Who thought I would fly to Michigan to film with Jay Schwanke on his channel and all that? You can't be scared. You have to put yourself out there, but be careful, because good things will happen. Good things will happen. You just have to get on the other side of the fear of it. But yeah, I'm thankful for all the opportunities that I've had, good and bad, because you learn from both.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Mandy, thank you so much for being on the Flower Podcast.
Hey, I've loved every minute of it.